so she'll join when she's available. All right, we've started. So good morning, everybody. I'm calling this meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force to order. It's 11:19 on 8/30, 2023, and I'm Barb Neal. As a reminder, the meeting's being recorded, and that recording will be posted publicly following the meeting. So I kind of did an informal roll call as we were all coming on, but I'll do it again for the record. I see Paul White is here. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
Michael Wright is here. Good morning, Michael.
Morning.
Ron Kumitz. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Okay. And Jim Mack. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great. Okay, so we do have a quorum. Also present, of course, is Callie Audette, who's providing our administrative support for the task force. Welcome back, Callie. And we have a few other members or members of the public or visitors watching. So I see Mandy Wooster. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning. My name is Mandy Wooster. I do policy development for the Department of Public Safety.
Morning, Mandy. And Stephen Whitaker. I believe that's you. If you're speaking, we can't hear you, Stephen. Okay, I'm going to carry on to the first agenda item, or second really, which is the approval of the agenda or any proposed additions or changes. So the agenda was distributed to task force members late last week, and it's also posted on our webpage. Do task force members have any changes to the agenda? No. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from August 17th, 2023. And those, excuse me, those meeting minutes were distributed late last week as well and are also available on the webpage. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from August 17?
So moved.
Michael, thank you. Second?
I'll second that.
It's Paul.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call because I'm not seeing very many people on camera here. So this is, if you are in favor of the approval of the minutes, please say aye. Michael Wright.
Oops, sorry. Aye.
Okay, Paul.
Aye.
Ron.
Aye.
Jim. You're muted, Jim. Okay, I'll vote in favor of them, which I believe is enough to get them approved, correct? All right. Minutes are approved. So next on the agenda is an update or status really of the two RFPs that were distributed. So both the little RFP for project management and the big RFP for subject matter expertise were publicly posted on August 22nd. Updates were posted on August 28th. There were some items that were discovered that needed correction. So we made the following correct. Here's a summary. So the title of the little RFP was changed to better reflect the purpose of the procurement as was addressed in an earlier task force meeting. So we added the words project management, where initially it just said essentially task force support. The little RFP indicated originally an expected start date of January 2024. And that was corrected because as we discussed in the task force meeting, we're expecting that work to begin as soon as possible. So that change was made. We also corrected the first paragraph in the little RFP to more clearly indicate the services that were being sought, which is project management. So there had been a paragraph that we approved in the task force meeting earlier this month that was essentially moved up and incorporated into the first paragraph of the RFP template. And then both RFPs, when they were originally released, indicated that the projects were being funded by federal dollars, which requires bidders to take additional steps in their bidder responses. So these projects are not being funded by federal dollars. So we corrected that, removed the sections that referenced federal funding and any requirements related to them. It's noted that there may come a point as this project, the big project evolves, where there are federal funds involved. And if we issue RFPs that are going to use federal funds, we'll note it in those, subsequent RFPs. So, any questions on the changes that we made? Okay.
I don't have a
Okay.
question, but I would just, for the benefit of the other task force members, I would just say that the reason these corrections had to be made is, after we as a group had approved these RFPs on August 17th, the documents then went through the process at the Agency of Digital Services. They went through a process at the BGS procurement office, and then of course they went to the procurement officer at the Department of Public Safety, and somewhere through those 3 different steps, kind of like the telephone game, some things got changed from what we had approved on the 17th. So we had to make some corrections to make sure they reflected what we as a group had approved 2 weeks ago.
Right. Thank you, Paul. That's good context. If you are curious to see the full documents, they are posted on the webpage now. So as a reminder, the bidder questions are due for the little RFP by September 6th, for the big RFP by September 8th. The little RFP responses are due September 26th. Big RFP responses are due October 13th. The task force should plan to meet, in my view. There's a couple different ways we can handle this, but the task force should be involved in responding and reviewing any responding to and reviewing any questions that come in from vendors, rather than leaving that as kind of an administrative function of the Department of Public Safety. I think that goes a bit beyond administrative support, and we as a group, in my opinion, I guess, I want to stress, should be involved in those decisions. So in situations that I've been involved with RFPs at the 911 board, our practice is to wait for all of the questions to come in from the vendors by the due date, and then review them and respond to them as one action, if you will, one meeting to discuss all the questions and develop the responses. Department of Public Safety has historically handled that a little differently, and they respond to the questions as they come in. If we're going to have task force involvement in reviewing and responding to questions, that would mean a lot of task force meetings potentially, or we could do it all together as a group after the deadlines for each of those bidder questions. So I guess that's a question we should discuss and decide on. And there's various components there that you might not agree with my opinion on all of that, but open the floor for discussion.
Well, I'll go ahead.
Yep.
I guess I don't necessarily have a preference. I will say that, I work as a contractor for the Agency of Transportation. And when I have to bid on those contracts, AOT does it the way you do it, Barb. They wait until the deadline for questions, and then they answer all of the questions for all of their people asking questions all at once. So
Mhm.
nobody gets any information sooner than anybody else. However, with that said, if the group wants to do it the way the commissioner proposed, where we answer each question as it arrives, I'm not opposed to that. But like you said, it might mean getting the task force together more often to take up those questions as they come.
Michael, go ahead.
I guess I would say I would propose that we wait and do it all as a, all of them at once.
Okay. Jim, I see you nodding. You agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd rather wait and do them all at once.
Okay. Ron, do you have an opinion or any thoughts on this issue?
In the big picture, and from my experience in various other areas, I'd say that responding to the questions as soon as possible so that multiple vendors don't go down an incorrect path that one vendor happened to discover and ask a question about is a preferable way to do this. I'd say that maybe we should wait and see how many questions start arriving and then decide on whether or not we want to have a meeting or to address those, or if we want to wait until they just all show up. So I guess that really depends on whether the questions amount to a trickle or a deluge.
Right. I can tell you that I am aware of one question that's come in on I think it was on the big RFP, which brought up this whole topic of how are we going to handle these. So one question since they've been released. I suppose we could ask the commissioner just to monitor how many questions are coming in, and if it feels like it's a deluge, then we could have schedule a meeting to handle what we have, and then a second meeting to handle what comes in following that. But it sounds like the consensus is that the preference is to handle them all at once in a timely manner so that we can get responses back, our responses back out as soon as possible so vendors can continue their work. So with that said, that would imply that we would have a meeting next Thursday, the 7th, because little RFP questions are due on the 6th. And then the big RFP questions are due on Friday. So I would recommend that we meet on Monday, whatever that day is. I think it's the 11th, actually, to review those questions, if that works for everyone. And we can discuss those specifics when we get to setting the next meeting dates. Does that work for everyone? Okay. Not hearing any objections to that. So, okay. The other thing that could streamline, just keep in mind, streamline those meetings is they could be special meetings that have just this topic on the agenda, so that there's no other issues discussed if you decide that's the way you want to approach it. Okay, so update on congressionally directed spending application. Commissioner Morrison did let me and Paul know earlier this week that the grant application was submitted on the 28th of August, right before the deadline, and it is currently under independent review. So I don't have more of an update on that. Maybe when the commissioner can join us, she'll be able to tell us a little bit more about that. Okay, next agenda item is to solicit member input on task force priorities during the RFP process. So the question is, what do we need to be thinking about while the vendors are out there hopefully working hard on their responses to us? I have a couple ideas, but I want to hear from other task force members first. So who's got some ideas here? All right, I will start then with well, actually, I could start with, the commissioner had sent some thoughts over earlier. I'll delay reading what she had and tell you what I had on my list. One of the things I'm a little, keeps running through my mind about the task force is, how we're represented, how the various constituencies, stakeholders in the state are represented on the task force, right? So we each have who we are representing, which is good and all appropriate. I am getting feedback from from some people that there is maybe some missing representation. So, for example, local and county law enforcement don't have a specific, the sworn side don't have a specific representation here. Now, Jim Mack was appointed by the Vermont Association of Chiefs of Police to represent the communications component of their operations. So, so it's more the sworn side that I'm hearing about, sort of some missing representation. I'm wondering too how the fire service is represented. We have volunteer fire service run through the Firefighters Association, if I'm remembering who it is and what they represent. I'm wondering if there needs to be additional from the career side of the house. The other thing is that I know is missing, perhaps, and I mean, there's nothing we can do to change the makeup of the task force members absent legislative involvement, but we can still reach out and engage with these groups if we think it's appropriate. But the non-PSAP emergency communications aren't here, who may have a different perspective on things. So one of the things we put into the RFP was to develop a stakeholder engagement plan. I'm thinking we should have a pretty good list of who we think we want to do outreach for or to, and those would be my thoughts on that. I wonder, does anybody else have any input on the stakeholders we should be keeping in mind here for like a targeted outreach?
Sure. This is Paul. I'm sorry, I don't have a camera on today. I'm just attending by my phone.
It's okay.
I agree with everything you said, Barb. I guess I would add to that list the municipalities who are going to find them, and they may be somewhat represented through Michael or through Ron. But there's a bunch of small municipalities who eventually who currently receive all their dispatching for free from the state police, and they are eventually going to find themselves told to go elsewhere. And they really are the ones that sort of started this whole process over a year ago, how we ended up where we are today. And so I think, I don't know if it's through the League of Cities and Towns or somehow reaching those communities that are going to have to start paying for something they've never paid for before.
Yep, that's a good point.
Or I guess to add to that, what Paul said is the ones that may not be a regional center. So for instance, St. J obviously has a dispatch center here, and they actually have plans to move that into a new building and kind of expand their dispatching space, I guess. But if it went to, let's say, Newport, then, that early heads up would be important, I think. But I don't know, it's going to take some time before we know that information, I guess. But I guess getting that word out that it's possible that something like that happens.
Okay, yep, that's a good point.
Back when 911 first came online, it was put out to all the dispatch centers who wanted to jump in on being a 911 facility. Wouldn't the same thing be a good idea to do to all the dispatches today? See who wants to expand their operations and take on additional areas.
Yes. See who even has an interest. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I think that's a good
Point.
point. I mean, that was kind of done last year when the commissioner was planning to award that. Was that the 9 million? Was that the 11 million? I've lost track of the pots of money, but there was a group of 10 or 11 or 12 agencies that stepped forward last year to ask for some of that federal funding to either create a new or expand an existing dispatch center that could sort of serve as a regional center. And then they all got shut down because the legislature sort of changed the direction of things. And so there is a group of them that are already sort of pre-identified, but yeah, we should do another query to make sure,
Yeah.
to see who's still interested and who might be interested now that didn't raise their hand last year.
It
Right.
would seem to me that to do the best justice to this task at hand, somehow creating a master list of fire, police, and fire law enforcement and EMS agencies, and where and how they're dispatched, might be a good way to avoid leaving somebody fall through the cracks.
I think that's a good idea. I also think that we probably have a good list to start from on the 911 side that I could pull together. So that would be
Yeah, and that
the
was-
dispatch agencies that we interact with. So we'd have to be careful we didn't lose anyone. Also through the associations, like the Sheriff's Association, the Chiefs of Police, the whatever other entities, stakeholders would be involved, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and so forth. Paul, were you going to say something more?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, that's correct, and that also was included as an attachment in last year's working group's final report. Although that
Okay.
is a little dated. That information is a little dated now. I'm sure it changes periodically.
It does, yeah. So I will, I'll look into that and get at least a start of a list going.
But that also is something that we are proposing the contractor to do under the big RFP, is to identify, every community and who they're dispatched by, because some communities are dispatched by multiple entities.
Right.
Like
so
Berlin, for example. The town of Berlin's a good example. Their police is dispatched by the state police, their fire is dispatched by Montpelier, and their ambulance is dispatched by Lamoille County. So.
Right. So yeah, it'll be their job to kind of round out that information so we have a complete picture. And also I don't want, us to be doing the work that we're going to hire a contractor to do, right? To do the stakeholder engagement.
Right.
But I think I would propose, and actually I would do this if you find it valuable. I think we should put together, and I'll do it if you want, a summary of what the task force has done to date. We were formed, here are the members, the summary of the RFPs that have been issued, and kind of just a summary of what we've done, and get that out at least to our, the constituencies that we all represent, and maybe some easily identifiable other entities that we want informed. If you think that's worthwhile to kind of start the stakeholder engagement in a very informal way, I'll put that summary together and we can take a look at it next week.
Well, I also don't think it would be bad to let some of these agencies out there know that the RFP is coming and a vendor is going to be asking them a lot of questions about their operations. And if
Yes.
they're interested in expanding their operation.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll put together a summary and we can talk about it next week. which
Would
negates
it-
what I said about it being a special meeting just to talk about the responses, but we'll figure that out. Michael, did you have something more?
Yeah, I was just thinking, would it be beneficial after maybe the letters are sent out or your information that you're gonna send out, maybe some regional meetings that we all sign into to answer questions or get feedback from? So we could have one based out of Rutland, maybe one based out of St. Johnsbury, one Chittenden County or whatever, maybe 4 different regional meetings that we could update everybody on what's current, what's happening, what to expect, that type of stuff. I think that would be really well received, and allow them, again, the opportunity to ask any questions that maybe some of us haven't even thought of at this point.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's going to be imperative to actually push this on people. My experience with VCOM was that there were some agency that sort of chose to ignore things, and then their excuse going forward was nobody told us about that. So I think when agencies don't respond, it's sort of imperative that we, reach out to their select boards or take whatever is necessary so that communities are not left in the dust because some fire, EMS, or law enforcement, chief decided that this was not important.
Right. Yeah, I think
Exactly.
opening up the lines of communication is really important. Agree.
That's an excellent point, because just because the fire chief knows doesn't necessarily mean that the town manager knows or the select board knows.
Right.
By exception, you're picking the fire chief to be the victim here.
All right.
Just as an example.
So good. So on that stakeholder engagement communications piece, I've got a couple takeaways. One is to update that master list of agencies and contacts, and draft this summary that we'll talk about next week. So, so if we're done for now with that topic, there is one other thing that I think we need to be thinking about as the vendors are hopefully working on their responses. And that is how we will evaluate the RFP responses when they come in. It could be, I suppose some of the options are, it could be the entire task force. It could be a subset of our already kind of small task force. Or what are your thoughts on that? And maybe I should frame it up this way. I don't know how much experience people have with RFPs and their evaluation, but there is a matrix that we defined in the RFP, right? That will be kind of guiding our discussions. Sometimes RFPs can be lengthy. So if there are a number of responses, it will take some time to read and digest that. And then we would meet as a group to what my experience in the past has been, they are reviewed and evaluated individually by the evaluation team, and then there's a discussion to come to a final assessment of each. So there is some work involved. So what do task force members think is a good approach for that? Paul, I see you're unmuted. I don't know if you wanted to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say, considering that we're a pretty small group already, we're a group of 7, and I think there's only been 1 or 2 times that we've had all 7 of us together. We generally is only 5 or 6. I think that
Right.
as many of us as can do it should make up the review team.
Anybody?
Yeah, I agree.
Ron? Okay.
Same here.
Okay, great. I agree with that as well. I was hoping that would be the case, that we would all take a look at that. So we'll we'll keep that in mind and look at the schedule and get the meetings on the calendar, maybe even next week. I'm not ready quite in my head to do it yet, but to allow some time for evaluation and then getting back together to discuss. So, okay, that sounds good. So we talked about stakeholder engagement, communications with them, and now we've talked about the response evaluation team or approach. Other things that we need to be considering right now. Okay. It's a big question, so it's not like we have to be one and done in this conversation, right? We can come back to this after the fact or in future meetings. I think we've got a pretty good start on things to do right now. Paul, do you happen to have the commissioner's email in front of you? And do we want to go over some of the things that she listed?
If you bear with me just a second here.
I'm doing the
think I
same
can-
thing, and I apologize. I should have had this up and running before. Here we go. I found it. So one of her questions, and this was kind of just an informal exchange, so was whether or not we needed a separate RFP to identify options for sustainable financing. Now, the commissioner and Paul and I had a little exchange where we think that that is covered in the existing big RFP. And so it may be best to wait until we get those responses, see how vendors might address that, and then decide if we need to go to some other process. So the other thing she mentioned was she talked about who was going to be involved in reviewing and scoring the RFP. So we've covered that. And there has been a suggestion at a couple of meetings now that the task force should consider getting its own legal counsel. Earlier, we were engaged with the Department of Public Safety legal counsel in the development of the confidentiality policy and just as a kind of consulting for how to do things right. The 911 board's legal counsel is through the Attorney General's office, and he was involved in some of the very preliminary work, but neither of those are independent and representing just the task force. So I'm not sure I have a strong opinion on this, but I'm wondering if others on the task force do.
Well, I will. I had suggested we talk about this because I had a call from Mr. Cheney, who
Yep.
I think is the one who has brought this to our attention a couple times. And considering that he is a former attorney general of our state, I thought if it's his opinion that we should have outside counsel, it certainly was at least worthy of a discussion. I'm personally, I'm not thinking of a scenario where I think either the AG's office or DPS's legal counsel would be conflicted. However, it certainly is possible. And I guess I don't know if we would need our own outside counsel or not, but since Kim had brought it up a couple of times, I thought it certainly was worth the task force's discussion.
Oops, I'm hearing funny beeps. I'm not sure where they're coming from, but any other, Mr. Cheney, I see your hand and I just want to check to see if task force members have any other input on this. And then I'll take a comment from Mr. Cheney.
I haven't seen a need as of yet for one, but it doesn't rule out the fact that we may need one at some point, potentially.
Right, and if we do, it would not be fun to then have to go out through some long lengthy process to get one, to get legal counsel. Okay. I'm gonna take a comment from Mr. Cheney. Go ahead. You're muted, Kim, if you can hear me. We can't hear you. Okay. I'm still not hearing. All right, I think what we'll do, hopefully we can hear Kim in a little bit, but right now it's still muted. So I think it might make sense for me to go back and talk to the commissioner about how we would do this. I suspect it might be another RFP, but I'm not certain what the process would be. So I can have a conversation with her, and also the vice chair, Paul White, could be involved, and we can figure out what potential next steps are on that front.
Okay, I think I've
There you
unmuted.
are. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Kim.
Look, the problem I foresee is any regional entity, new or expanded, is going to be a very complicated job. It's going to require understanding the requirements for proportional representation, taxation, a lot of very complicated things that is not normally in the wheelhouse of assistant attorneys general. And the experience that I had with this is it's fraught with conflicts amongst people, not only people who want usually more power than others, but how to resolve them equitably and actually construct a regional organization. So I don't think this is necessarily a day-to-day problem on procedures and the like, but I think it's a long-range problem if you're ever going to construct a regional system that works. And I puzzled over it for hours, and I can't say that I really understand all the ins and outs of it. It's complex. So I think you need somebody familiar with intermunicipal organization. And it's something this task force is going to have to face at one point if they ever decide to go regional. And you could do an RFP, or you can informally, I suppose, ask. I suppose the RFP is the way to do it, but it may be that some of you all have worked with somebody who you think is competent at this, and we can have a discussion about it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. And I see the commissioner has joined us. Good morning, Jen.
Good morning, Barb.
So we just covered 3 different items in the solicit member input for task force priorities agenda item. And I can summarize them for you perhaps after the meeting. We've got a bit of a plan for some early stakeholder engagement and communications. And we were just finishing up the conversation on whether or not the task force itself needs a legal counsel, which is what Mr. Cheney was commenting on. And before you joined, I think I had said that I would go back to you and also with Paul White to discuss what our next steps might be. Everyone is tending towards this is not a bad idea to have independent legal counsel. So I think we need to put our heads together and just figure out what the path forward on that might look like, and we can bring it back to the group hopefully soon in a future meeting.
Very good. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yes. So we also have discussed the RFP response evaluation team, and the group decided best case is for the task force itself as a whole to be involved with that. So we'll be looking at getting calendars scheduled for that and so on. So are there other comments or considerations that we need to be thinking about now while the RFP process is evolving? Okay. We have quite a few tasks just from that brief conversation, so we'll get to work on that. We can now move on to the public comment period of the meeting. We do have a number of people on the call, so I'm going to limit public comment to 3 minutes. And if you would like to comment as a member of the public, would you please so indicate? Raise your hand if you can. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Stephen, I've seen the light. Yeah, now I can hear you.
It's Steve Whitaker.
Yes, go ahead, Stephen.
A couple of cautions. The governance piece that I've been saying and that Paul White brought up at the last meeting related to interim, you can't really pave the way for pilot projects, which have to be approved by the end of this year, without addressing the governance. Even if it's an interim governance guidance, representative governance by served members was, I think, a phrase that was in an earlier RFP. But again, that relates to what Kim Cheney just said regarding legal counsel. You're not going to find a national consulting firm that knows Vermont politics and municipal law to the degree necessary to put some interim guidance for governance in place. So you're going to need to deal with that immediately in order to even begin convening what's called a joint survey committee in Vermont statute towards a regional authority of some sort that's going to own public safety communications infrastructure. So the folks that have worked on that are Giuliani, Gillies, people like that, who are experts in municipal corporations. So I would encourage you to waste no time in getting that expertise on board. Otherwise, you're going to have subject matter experts trying to subcontract to them to get their governance recommendations in place, which is going to create unworkable delays. But the RFP, I'm concerned that the task force feels capable of, reviewing these RFPs when no one helped write the RFPs. The RFPs apparently were drafted by Department of Public Safety and ADS personnel, and there's no specificity of what the tasks, there's no even understanding or comprehension of what these tasks entail. And so I think we're kind of stuck behind the 8 ball without some significant revisions to the RFP, especially the subject matter expert. The 1 or 2 changes to the project manager RFP would be to define the problem and to lay out the next 4 months worth of tasks, because it's not just administrative support, which is the Department of Public Safety's obligation. It is hit the ground running and get any pilot projects in shape to be voted on before the end of the year. And I would say the project manager should be designing the public engagement piece. I would caution against what I heard earlier in the meeting about just ask whoever's currently in place if they're interested in growing, because most of what we're seeing and the mess that we ran into before was due to the lack of regional governance. So, you know, until you get regional governance guidance in place, you can't really fairly poll the communities on who wants to expand or create an authority or create a new center. So this stuff is more complicated than can be left to a task force that didn't write the RFP and isn't even going to know whether it meets the requirements, because the requirements are not well defined in the RFP. So the financing study can wait till another meeting, but governance, interim governance and interim technical standards need to be first on the plate in order to get pilot projects. I think you should amend the RFP and invite specific proposals to address pilot projects by year end as a way to prove out their strategy, their concept, and their workflow. Not doing so is the task is too big. That's why we don't have a 10-year telecom plan. The state is too big and too diverse to handle it in one fell swoop. And you will not get started if you don't focus on a specific geographic area and prove that it works. You know, we don't want to sink $10 or $11 million into this and find out that it was the wrong track, like we did with prior projects. So I think that's probably enough. I didn't hear you poll how many people wanted to talk before you limited it to 3 minutes, because there might have been more opportunity there. Thanks.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Stephen. I will ask again if there are any guests or members of the public that would like to provide comment. Okay. Hearing none, we can go on to new business, which is setting the next business date, unless there's other new, is there any other new business? Okay. All right, so setting the next meeting date. So we talked about meeting after the RFP questions are due. The little RFP questions are due on the 6th. So I would recommend we meet on Thursday, the 7th. And again, on Monday, the 11th, which is after the big RFP questions are due. So I guess we should take one at a time. I'll throw out Thursday, the 7th at 11:15.
Barb, I am unavailable on the 7th and 8th.
For the whole day?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Well, that will change our plan then. What does the 8th look like?
I think she said the 7th.
I'm fine on either the 7th or the 8th.
Barb,
So
you know,
neither the 7th nor the 8th work.
Okay. I'm sorry, Paul, what did you say?
Do you know the due date on the 6th? Is it 4 o'clock that questions are due, or 1 o'clock?
It is 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. So would it be unreasonable to think we could meet like immediately thereafter? 6th.
Commissioner, do you think that the procurement person could get us the questions at 3 o'clock, like on the dot?
I can certainly ask. I think we could take a swing at it, and at least we'd have most of them, right? Because if something came in at 2:59 and we didn't have it, then we could come back to it when we convene the second time to talk about the questions for the big RFP.
Oh, actually, that's a good point. We could, why don't we plan to meet at 3:15 on Wednesday, the 6th? That work for everybody?
That works for me.
Yes,
Okay, Paul, good. Jim, I see you nodding.
yes.
Michael? Okay, perfect. So 3:15 on September 6th. Okay, and then the big RFP questions are due on the 8th. So we should look to Monday, the 11th, if possible. I'm not available on the 12th. So what does the 11th look like at, I don't know, pick a time. 11:15 maybe?
Anytime after 12,
Thanks.
anytime after 12 noon is fine with me.
Okay,
Yeah, I was
I
just gonna
will
say
be-
afternoon would be better for me.
I will
Thanks,
be out
Paul.
of town on the 11th and probably the 12th as well.
okay. I'm not sure we want to move the questions out to the 13th. Thoughts on that? The purpose being to get back to them as quickly as possible so that they can continue their work.
I would say that if you're considering the 12th and you have it in the afternoon, then I'm likely to be here. I'm really hoping to be back late on the 11th, but things happen, so just wanted to be safe.
I'm not available on the 12th, so
Would it
um,
be, so if the questions are due on Friday, the 8th,
we could do the same thing,
Is that
but although
also-
the commission,
is that also,
yeah.
well, I was just thinking, is that also a 3 o'clock thing? I'm just wondering if we could get the questions sent to us by email, and then we could, think about them over the weekend, and somebody who's not going to be available on Monday, maybe send their feedback by email back to the chairs.
That sounds reasonable.
Okay. All right. I like that idea. So let's go back to Monday then. Anytime in the afternoon was what was last on the table. So how about 1 o'clock?
It's fine by me.
Okay, thanks. Jim's nodding. Michael, does that work for you? Okay, 9/11 at 1 p.m. and we'll email the questions out to task force members when they come in on the 8th. So, Commissioner, go ahead.
Barb, I just want to make sure that one of my staff texted me, and I want to make sure that the description of the congressionally directed spending application was accurate. The grant was submitted for this most recent deadline with the supporting documentation requested. Part of that supporting documentation is a request for funding for an independent expert review. The independent
see.
expert
Okay.
review doesn't happen unless we are awarded the grant.
Yes, I think I did say that incorrectly then because I said that it was under independent review. So that's a good clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. And Callie, will you send a summary of these dates, of what I need to ask the business office for, please? Because I'm driving and I can't take the notes right now. Thank you.
Yes, I can do that. I also just wanted to ask if these would be scheduled as special meetings or if they're going to be full regular meetings.
I think the September 6th one where we're meeting at 3:15 in the afternoon should be a special meeting that is specific to the questions on the little RFP. And I would recommend that the Monday meeting at 1 o'clock be a regular meeting so that we can discuss the questions to the big RFP. And also, I will have that summary that I'm going to put together for the stakeholders that we identify. I'll have that together and ready for review by then as well. So I should look to the commissioner though to see, as co-chair, do you have any other opinion on that, how we should do that? Oops, I think we lost her. So let's proceed with that. So special meeting on the 6th, Callie, just for the questions. And then regular meeting on the 11th. And I'll get you agendas.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And good. Okay. So I think we have that all down. Anything else from task force members for today? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move, we adjourn.
So moved.
Paul?
Okay.
Second.
I got Paul moved. I got Michael seconded, but I'll let Callie keep track of all that. You all set? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Hi.
Aye.
I
We are adjourned. Thank you very much,
Great, thank you, Barb.
everybody.
day.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Yep. Bye-bye.